Wir haben euch etwas ganz Besonderes von der Comic-Con mitgebracht. Zum einen natürlich das nun folgende Interview mit Claudia Gray. Darin haben Florian und Ines fast eine Stunde lang mit der Star Wars-Autorin über ihre ersten Werke von Lost Stars bis Master and Apprentice und natürlich die Hohe Republik geredet. Zusätzlich haben wir aber auch eine ganz besondere Edition des Buches Blutlinie für euch, was zwischen Episode 6 und 7 spielt und das zweite Werk der Star Wars-Autorin war. Das könnt ihr in diesem Beitrag gewinnen und darin ist sogar eine exklusive Widmung an den Jedi-Cast und alle Zuhörer. Also, kommt dazu einfach auf unsere Website, schaut in den Beitrag und füllt das entsprechende Gewinnspielformular aus. Viel Erfolg und jetzt viel Spaß mit dem Interview von der Comic-Con 2025 mit Claudia Gray.
Hi there, this is Claudia Gray, and you are listening to JediCast for Light and Life.
R2, wir empfangen eine Übertragung. Eine neue Ausgabe des JediCast? Leite sie sofort über alle Kanäle an die Rebellenflotte weiter.
Hello everyone and welcome to a special episode of JediCast. Today we're at CON Stuttgart 2025 and we've got some special guests with us. My name is Florian, with me is Ines.
Hi there.
And with us is very special guest Star Wars author Claudia Gray. Hi.
Hi there.
How have you been finding the event so far?
So far, it has been absolutely phenomenal. So many wonderful people. This is my first event ever in Germany. And people have been so enthusiastic, so tremendous. They brought in boxes of books, which is very heartening. And we've seen some really terrific cosplay today. Also, a little bit of disturbing cosplay today.
All right, let's start off the interview with how you started as a Star Wars author. How were you first approached to write a Star Wars novel? Your first novel was Lost Stars.
Well, I should begin by saying that I got into writing fiction at all through fan fiction. I never took any courses or anything like that, but I got really into writing X-Files fan fiction in like 1994, 1995. Online fandom was still very new, and sadly, I have to tell young people today, for the first 2 years or so, everyone was so nice to each other. We were so lovely. And back then you met people through it. I got to know a lot of people through doing that. And many of us became real life friends and got to know each other. And I kept on writing a great deal of fan fiction, and some of it got to be novel length. And then finally thought, okay, let's see if I can do some original fiction. And I got to publish a lot of young adult fiction. And I think I'd written somewhere between 6 and 8 books at that point. And I remember I was pumping gas and my agent called, my agent at the time, and she said, "Did you see that email?" And I was like, "What email?" And she said, "The one that says Star Wars." So I opened it and there was the question. And Star Wars had never done anything sort of like a young adult book before. So it just was not on my radar. Yeah. But this is the part where I point out that one of the editors in Star Wars fiction was somebody I met on Alt TV X-Files Creative in 1995. So yes, the correct answer in my life was, in fact, yes, blow off law school and screw around on the internet. That's what you need to do. It paid off for me.
Very good tip for our listeners.
And,
Yes.
and as teachers, Ines and I have to say, no, don't break up, don't drop out.
They love it at schools when I tell this story, because I'm like, everything in my life I thought was career preparation was wasted time, but everything I thought was wasted time was career preparation.
And at this point, the interview is ended.
But I should mention, it wasn't just that she knew me. She had read my fan fiction over the years, and she knew how I worked with existing properties. Everybody does whatever they want to with fan fiction. It could be anything. And I did all different kinds of things, but I also wrote a lot of stuff that really could slot into canon very easily. So she knew that I could work with that whole body of it. And she knew that I really loved Star Wars, but she also said, we get a lot of fans that pitch us, even professionals, but they're so into one little aspect of Star Wars that we can't get them to write about the bigger galaxy. And she said, I know that the way you feel about Star Wars, the way that you're interested in it, is something that encompasses that whole world, and that's something that we can work with. So that is how I got into it.
Very interesting story, actually. So let's talk about Lost Stars some more. When you ask people what their favorite Star Wars novel is, Lost Stars is an answer that you get many times.
Yay.
So a lot of people love that book. How do you explain its immense success? What did it do differently than other novels?
I think the fact that it was about these original characters, but set in these events that we all know, I think that was the core of it. Because, you know, when you're reading fiction about it, it's one thing to say, like, oh, what would it be like if I were Luke Skywalker? Or what would it be like if I were Leia Organa? But it's another thing to say, well, who would I be if I'm really in that world? What does it look like? How much do you know? What are you being told? What does it feel like? And I think that book really invited people to imagine themselves in that galaxy and to look at it through their own eyes. And I think that there was a bigger appetite for that. I mean, there have been other great original characters, don't get me wrong, though.
Clearly.
Only You had tons, but there was something about the familiar events. You know, what would you think about the destruction of Alderaan?
So who
How would
else
this
was there,
affect you?
and what did they think?
Yeah, because I think it was the combination of those really, really, you know, major iconic events in the Star Wars franchise, and yet being able to imagine a different perspective on that.
Yeah, but if you ask people why they love Lost Stars, I think many will say the main characters, Thane and Sienna, right? So how did you come up, or like what was the inspiration for the dramatic love story in Lost Stars? And generally, like, how did that book come together, like from a pitching standpoint as well?
Well, when they came to me, they said, you know, we want a romance between two people that wind up on opposite sides of this civil war. And we want this angry, troubled guy who joins the Empire and this idealistic girl who joins the rebellion. You know, I thought about it for a day, and I came back and I was like, I want the idealistic girl in the Empire and the angry guy in the rebellion. And they said, all right. And that's literally about what they gave me. And so I started building it out from there, because the big question is, okay, what makes somebody join the Empire or the rebellion? And it's not as easy as good person, bad person, because you have to assume there's supposed to be, billions of people in the Imperial Starfleet? You know, they're not all twirling their mustache and drowning kittens, you know.
Not everybody is talking.
Yeah,
right?
And not everybody who's going to rise up against even an evil state is necessarily coming at it from this place of incredible idealism. If you think about it, it's the idealistic person who wants to believe in the system. It's the angry person who sees flaws in the system. And I think people really connected to that, because you were seeing the Empire and the Rebellion, and they were the Empire and the Rebellion that you knew, but from people who had slightly different reasons for being there and saw it in different ways than had traditionally been portrayed. That, and also people like a love story. A lot of people, especially guys, think they don't. But, you know, because all these people are like, oh, I hate romance in Star Wars. Anakin and Padme, oh, it's so bad. But then you go, do you like Han and Leia? They're, oh, yeah, I love Han and Leia.
Sure, right.
You know, people just want to see it done well. You know, they don't want it to be like, oh, two cute people are in each other's vicinity, they must kiss. People really felt like, okay, these people have been friends their whole lives. There really is a bond.
It needs to be believable. Yeah.
Right. They're trying to keep that connection alive in a time and a place that makes that almost impossible. And I think people did connect to that.
I kind of love how a lot of what you've just said about all of it echoes in Andor, right? So, like, I was thinking a lot of that could be said about Biggs and Cassian, about their troubles and their fight. So,
yeah, I mean, you know that I am literally one of the biggest Andor fans that can exist. You know this now.
I know this, yes.
We've been hanging out for almost a day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we rewatched Andor the night after we had washed all those dishes and everything that Thursday night before I got up in the morning to come over here the next day. And we watched some Andor before we went to bed because we do. But it made me really happy to see some things like that. Like it did have that same idea of you're in that galaxy, but here's a completely different perspective on it. Here's a completely different reason. The whole idea, everybody has their own rebellion that they say multiple times. And there were also little things, like there's a scene in Lost Stars where Thane has been instructed to fly his TIE fighter over people to scare them.
Yeah.
He's supposed to be intimidating people. And then there you are on Aldhani, and that TIE fighter makes that thing there clearly for no reason other than harassment and intimidation. And I was like, yes.
Me too, actually. I thought of Lost Stars in that moment. I was like, that's exactly the
that's
scene.
what they do. That's what they do. It made me happy.
Yeah. So talking about The Force Awakens, like Lost Stars was a part of the journey to The Force Awakens and embedded in that context. How much did you actually know about the movie when you wrote the novel?
Oh, almost nothing. With The Force Awakens, it was very, very difficult to find out anything. The Last Jedi, they told us pretty much everything. I got to read a script.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the whole thing. I mean, they show you into a little room, and you have to be in the room with it, etc. But
So you're not allowed to keep a copy. It's all like at Lucasfilm headquarters.
No.
And, yeah,
I mean, it's printed on red paper that is very difficult to photograph and copy. But I mean, I knew almost nothing. In fact, I just wrote the book, and I was like, you guys figure out how it connects to The Force Awakens, because how would I know? And then they were like, listen, if you change the penultimate scene, the big action sequence at the end, just a little bit, because originally it all happened in space.
All right.
And then they're like, if they were to crash onto a certain desert planet called Jakku, it will tie into The Force Awakens. And I was like, but that is not a problem. I can certainly do this. And I wrote that. And I have to say, the day I turned in that revision where I changed the last scene to do that, it was the day the second trailer came out. And there are spoilers for Lost Stars incoming. Fast forward 30 seconds or so if you haven't read the end. But that trailer begins with Rey driving her speeder across Jakku, and she goes past that crashed Star Destroyer. And the John Williams music is playing. Yes. And I was literally like, I just crashed that ship. And there it is. And honestly, I don't think it's ever going to get any better than that. That was pretty fabulous. Yeah,
that's amazing. I thought that would have been a suggestion that you had to write and not something that was kind of a coincidence.
They just suggested, put it there. So down she went.
Great.
And I think the planet Dakar also appears, right? Like the Resistance planet.
It does.
Yeah,
it does.
right.
Yeah, I ask sometimes, can you suggest a this or a that, a planet that's good, and there were a few things like that in there. So that was good. But like, I didn't even know the characters' names until the book was well into edits. I don't think any of us even knew Rey was the actual central character until the movie came out. It's hard to remember, and I kind of wonder why they were that. Whatever, they did that way.
Yeah, I don't think we need to get into that.
No.
So now it's been 10 years. Are there any plans for a sequel to Lost Stars? Lots of people are asking about it, I think.
There are some in my head. Lucasfilm, if they share any of these thoughts,
Please make it happen.
have not acted on it. I mean, the thing is, I keep getting feedback from them that it is something they would like to do. It just never seems to be the thing they want to do next. So I don't know if it's ever going to happen or not. I will say that I would love to do it. I feel like I have ideas worth exploring for it. It wouldn't just be like, here they are,
doing the same thing again.
Like, I think I could do something meaningful with it.
Right.
But if it ends where it ends, I am also happy with that. It's sort of the Casablanca ending, where on the one hand, you're like, what happens next? But the core story beat, I think, is fulfilled.
Yeah, like, were there any discussions about the ending, whether it should be a happy ending or a tragic ending, or
There was actually, early on, there was a little bit of push from Lucasfilm to make it a more tragic ending.
Oh, wow.
And I did not want to do that. Well, the thing that I think they had figured on, like they got the idea from, was, I don't know if this movie is anywhere near as ubiquitous over here as it is in the US, but The Sound of Music.
We know about it.
We know The Sound of Music.
It's not very popular in Germany.
I
Many
wonder,
people don't know it.
how could that be? But there is a sort of romance between a young girl and a young man. But in the end, the young man loves Hitler more than he loves her. And bad choices. But
Certainly.
And I think because that was where they got the idea, they kept thinking, well, it has to end, in this place that's a lot darker. And I was like, no, the way we've actually set up this story now and where it is, that's not where it ought to go. And in the end, they went for that. So
after Lost Stars, you then got to do more Star Wars, which was great. You've dedicated yourself to the character of Leia, right?
Yes.
Like you did a lot of Leia stuff for a while. First off, like you've written Leia, Princess of Alderaan, who was a teenager, where she was a teenager, and then in Bloodline, we meet an older version of Leia a few years before the sequels, right?
Bloodline was actually written first, though.
Right, yeah. Bloodline was first. Yeah, sure. I was thinking timeline in this story, but sorry about that. All right.
That's okay.
So what does the character of Leia mean to you then as a fan and creator?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I turned 7 the summer that Star Wars came out in theaters. And so, first of all, that was huge. We were the first generation that just imprinted on this, like, baby ducks, on their mama. Just like, what? It just filled our brains. And also at that time, you didn't have a lot of heroines who were very active and interesting. And the only other ones that were out there, you had a version of Wonder Woman, maybe you had the Bionic Woman, but they were still very much at pains to make them, they could be sort of fierce and dynamic in one way, but then they had to be very girlish in other ways. And, Leia got up in there and was in people's faces, and she was a believable revolutionary leader. And you absolutely adored that. And so she's just been a huge part of my life forever and ever and ever. And the joke I say a lot is I spent my whole life going, well, what would Princess Leia do? And then finally, after 30 years or so, they were like, we will pay you money to answer this question.
That's the dream.
It is the dream. It is the dream. Actually, one of my happiest moments came when one of the heads of Disney Publishing or Star Wars Publishing said, we kind of see you as Princess Leia's like guardian or caretaker. Wow. Yeah. And like I split into two at that moment. Like professional me was like, that is such an honor and that is amazing. And I will always take that seriously and cherish it. And fan me was like, that is correct. I am glad we have finally got that established. I have known it since about 1980. I'm just glad we're all on the same page.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say they should give it to you in writing, but I mean, they let you write those 2 novels. So
I hope to write more about Leia someday, but we'll have to see.
Let's hope so. Yeah. So with Bloodline, you already said it tied into The Last Jedi a bit, right?
Mm-hmm. That one ties into,
Force Awakens, but I think I've heard it said that Rian Johnson wrote like the initial gem of the story or something.
I got about a page and a half, and some of it came from Rian Johnson. Some of it was actually from George Lucas's original treatments or whatever.
About?
Like Castrofo was actually a character originally conceived of by George Lucas. Now, he was very different. He was very different.
He probably didn't have the name either, right?
He had the name Castrofo. He didn't have the name Ransom, but he had the name Castrofo. But he was an out-and-out bad guy. And he worked on Princess Leia's staff, and he was secretly betraying her and had all these artifacts. Spoilers from Bloodline are coming. All right. But this character, basically, he worked on Leia's staff, but secretly, he hated her, and he had these secret Imperial artifacts. And when the time was right, he let the world know that Darth Vader was her father. And I didn't buy that. I was like, Leia is somebody who we have canonically seen survive 2 underground resistance movements. Right. And you do not get there without having a pretty attuned sense of who to trust. Right. I was like, I don't buy this. So I said, okay, I'm going to flip it and actually make him the adversary, but the adversary who has a point.
Right.
The one she has to listen to. And he does collect these imperial artifacts, but for him, it's historical. He's like, but it's just history. This is harmless. And of course, over the course of the story, he has to be like, oh, but these people I've surrounded myself with, it may not just be history for them. This is maybe a little suspect. And he still does, of course, make that reveal, but for different reasons. And he's sort of set up for this. And that was great fun to play with. I think I had more fun with Casterfo than any other. I call him an original character, even though, like I said, Lucas came up with him, but he changed so much.
Yeah, and as you said, like it was like what a page worth of
about
material.
a page and a half,
So,
and none of that involved the sort of underground stuff with the Nikto. Like none of that was in there. It was all political.
at this point, he is an original character.
I mean, can
right?
I swear on this podcast?
Oh yes, sure. Like
Okay. I mean, I read the
I'll
little
just
page and a
allow
half,
it.
and it was all about the political stuff. It was all about the political maneuvering. And I came back to them and I was like, okay, I can work with this, but she has to blow shit up. And they were like, okay. Because, and I say this as somebody who owned many, many old EU books, and I mean, dozens upon dozens. I only fell out of it, like it started in 1989, 1988?
the EU, I think about 10 years earlier than you said. Like if you go by Heir to the Empire, it was...
Yeah, Heir to the Empire is late 80s,
1991,
right?
I
91?
think. I think,
I know I was in college. I'm
Yeah.
really dating myself here, but somewhere in there. But only when I went to graduate school in the year 2000 I just had too much to do and I fell behind. So, but as somebody who loved the old EU, there was a really unfortunate tendency for Luke and Han to go get to do the cool stuff
Right.
while Leia was in the Senate. And I was like, I'm not redoing that. Like, this is an active, dynamic person. She may be a politician, but she's a soldier. She's an operator. I want this book to be as true to that part of her. And luckily I got to do that. So that was great.
Yeah, I think that's really important to a lot of female fans who have been waiting for Leia to be more active.
Yes.
But back to the political plot.
Okay.
So in Bloodline, as you've explained, there is a lot of division in the Senate and opposite groups fighting each other. And politics in Star Wars, people are quite divided about that topic. Some people love it. Some people say, well, Star Wars, I would prefer Star Wars to be this means of escapism, like it should be free of any allusions to the real world. How do you see that? Do you think Star Wars should be in our times and a means of escapism to escape the real world, or should it be related to real world events and give messages for us?
Let me put it this way. Like, on the one hand, you can't divorce the idea of politics from anything that's supposed to be this huge, pan-galactic story. Right. It's impossible to have that without some politics. The first movie is very clear about having some politics in it. But if it maps too closely onto our world and our events, then you've lost it a little bit. Like, you should be able to see echoes of things because that's how people act, because that's how power works. You should recognize it. But if you were going to be like, well, I'm just one-to-one going to retell the story of, I don't know, whatever political thing, but put it in Star Wars, it's a different thing when you have all these different species and you actually have a governmental body with 10,000 years of history.
Right.
Like, it should feel a little different. It shouldn't map exactly. But at the same time, if people aren't acting in ways that ring true to us, we don't emotionally engage with it. And if they're acting in ways that ring true to us, you're going to touch on some things that are vital and important today.
Right, and I always think that escapism allows us to like step back from reality and watch it from outside in a way, right? And sort of like cushion us against it a bit, right? And I think that's a great way. So Then you went back into Leia's past,
Yes.
this time as an actual tie-in to The Last Jedi with Leia, Princess of Alderaan. And you had the opportunity to shape the culture of Alderaan a bit. How was that?
Oh, that was wonderful. With that one, they just came to me and they're like, we want you to tell the story of how Princess Leia got involved with the rebellion. I was like, oh, fantastic. How did it happen? They're like, we want you to tell us. I was like,
You tell us.
okay, And sort of I think the default assumption had always been, and the thing you always heard people say was, well, Bail brought her in. Bail brought her into it. Okay. I don't know if either of you have kids. You know people who have kids, et cetera. You have parents at minimum.
We do.
All right.
We're not Anakin Skywalker.
Let's just say that the average parent, let's say this parent is engaged in something that while they feel it is vitally important, is super, super illegal and will 100% get them tortured and killed if they are ever found out about it.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Do you, A, get your young child deeply involved in this activity, or B, keep your kid as far away from that activity as you possibly can? I think B is much more credible. And so I was like, and also Leia, she's not a passive character.
Not at all.
Take her, and also by the time we meet her in A New Hope, she's already a leader. She's 19, and people take her seriously, and they're right to. And it's like, okay, this is not somebody who started small, So I got to sort of redo it and have her be much more active in being like, why are things so weird with my parents? What's going on? Which again calls them to a lot of classic young adult tropes. Are the parents getting a divorce? Is something else happening, et cetera? And you're in adolescence, that's very difficult because on the one hand, it deeply, deeply concerns you and you really want to know. But on the other hand, you're old enough to know now that some of this is not your business and you may or may not be able to do anything about it. But to take that and actually have that be like, oh, it's the rebellion, it's this other thing, that was a fun thing to play with. Did that make sense?
Totally.
Okay,
I enjoyed
great.
that twist, actually, that it was Leia who did the investigation to find out about the rebellion.
Yeah, and it was good because, we saw it in Rogue One, and Rogue One definitely was a big influence. I'd outlined the book before seeing Rogue One, but then, it was written with that knowledge, and this is even earlier than that tentative moment then when these people are like, do we actually go into battle? Is this really happening? It's tentative. People aren't sure. And really, if you really think about it, this war killed trillions of people. And they knew it was going to kill trillions of people. And before you start that war, you have to be really sure that the status quo is going to be worse than something absolutely terrible. And it was interesting to get to see Leia wrestle with that some and to know that even, some of the adults are wrestling with that as well. And of course, she has a love interest in the book, Kier, who comes to a different conclusion, not because he's a coward or because he loves the Empire, but he did a different moral calculus. And in the end, maybe it was wrong, but you can't say, like, this was a bad person who thought these things. This is somebody who's like, I want to protect Alderaan. My world is in danger. He wasn't wrong.
True, yeah. Let's come to your next book, which was A Master and Apprentice.
Yes.
And in this book, you got to explore the relationship between Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon.
Yes.
What fascinates you about these two?
I had always been interested in Qui-Gon Jinn. Like, I loved him. That really got me through The Phantom Menace. Like, I kept rewatching it, and I was like, if you really put your mind to it, you don't even see Jar Jar. Like, you could just watch Qui-Gon. And I was very interested in him, especially because he felt like, when we see the Jedi Order in the prequels, they've lost their way to some extent. Yeah. Individuals are still great, but the Order has turned into almost like a police force for the Republic.
A military even, right?
I mean, even think about it. Does Yoda say one wise thing in the prequels movies?
Probably not.
No, he's become a bureaucrat. begun these Clone Wars have. I mean,
only at the end of episode 3, I think he has a few lines of wisdom.
But after a terrible reckoning,
after being humbled,
that's what it takes. And it feels like Qui-Gon was one of the last of the mystics.
Right.
I know that Dave Filoni and a couple of others have had this thing going lately where they're sort of like, oh, if Qui-Gon had lived, maybe Anakin would never have fallen. Because Obi-Wan didn't understand. Well, here's my thing. I don't think it's like, oh, Obi-Wan screwed up because, one, you're supposed to be a Jedi for a long time before you become a master and take a Padawan. Obi-Wan did not get one day. It was like, nope, you're teaching right now. He got a kid that was older than anybody else who had preternatural gifts.
Yeah.
And Anakin still became a Jedi and a great Jedi. Like, Obi-Wan did that. Anakin fell because of Palpatine. That influence, it was tearing away. So the real question is, would Qui-Gon have realized that Palpatine was Darth Sidious? And that, I think, is very possible because, again, he was sort of one of the last of the mystics and sort of free thinkers in that world. And so I was always very interested with him, in him and in working with that. Now, that said, once they were like, write a Qui-Gon book. It's about 7 years before The Phantom Menace. Go. And I was like, oh, okay. But then, it really was very difficult because I wanted to tell this story and that story and parts of that story. And, I keep joking. I basically wanted to do a 5-volume biography of Qui-Gon Jinn. And, and
Lucasfilm, if you're listening.
Yeah, Lucasfilm was like, one book, please. Please tell just one story. And what it came down to in the end was, I was like, okay, what's the one thing you must understand about Qui-Gon? And it is, why does he believe in those prophecies? Because nobody else does. Even Yoda's like, that's nonsense. But if he doesn't believe in them, the whole story doesn't happen. So it's like, okay, that's the one thing you need to know about him. Why does he believe it? And because of that, I not only got to have the story with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, but to have the flashbacks where Qui-Gon is the apprentice and Dooku is the master, and get into that as well. Because Dooku, even when he was a Jedi and on the side of the light, he was something of an iconoclast. He did look into aspects of the Force and Force history and Force use that were not standard for the Jedi Order. And so,
to put it mildly, probably, yeah.
To put it mildly, yeah. So I thought, that creates a very fertile ground for young Qui-Gon to have learned about this.
Yeah, and you brought in Rail Everos as well,
yes.
Right? Yeah.
I saw my first Rail cosplay today. I'm still very excited.
That's amazing. Yeah, he looked great, right?
He looked fantastic.
Yeah. Why did you bring that character in there as well?
It was interesting because I wanted there to be somebody who was sort of a friend of Qui-Gon, but I wanted to cast it in a slightly different way than just, this is my friend. Yeah. And I really liked the idea that, if a master had one Padawan and then, that person becomes a knight and then they take another Padawan, that the earlier Padawan or Padawans might sort of be mentors.
Yeah, I like
to this
that
new
idea.
apprentice because they're a little bit closer in age, and they could be like, oh, listen, they're sticklers for this. As long as you're doing whatever, they're going to understand. I thought that would be a very valuable, and I felt like natural, that would be a pretty natural thing to be happening. Right. And Lucasfilm said they liked the idea, and so the idea of Rail as the previous Padawan to Dooku and somebody who had been a mentor to Qui-Gon, I thought it gave a lot of texture to it that just saying they were friends didn't necessarily give. And it's also about that moment between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan where Obi-Wan goes from being a child that Qui-Gon is teaching to a peer that he is mentoring. Right. And that is a difficult transition for both sides of it. And having a character who had previously been a mentor to Qui-Gon be part of that mix, I thought, let us play with that.
Yeah, it was an interesting, almost like family-like dynamic,
yes.
Right? Yeah, like elder siblings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
All right, you've already mentioned the prophecies that appear in Master and Apprentice.
Yes.
And of course, there has been much speculation about those. The prophecy about the Nameless apparently has been solved in the High Republic.
Yeah, that is the only one that refers to anything specific.
All right.
Everything else is completely made up, and I know that I did a good job because people are like, it's clearly this. No, it's clearly that, which is, the nature of the prophecy. You could see it anywhere you really want to. But the one with the nameless, we had just begun work on the High Republic at that point. So, I got to drop that in there, but everything else could apply to many different things.
Maybe a story for the future then. An opportunity.
It could be. Yeah. It could be. But yeah, that was the fun of it. Like, prophecies are tricky. You can see in them whatever you want to.
Well, speaking of the High Republic, how come you became a part of that team of creators who were able to create that new era in Star Wars?
Mike Seglain, who, spearheaded that initiative, he had mentioned something to me as early as late 2015 that eventually he wanted to do a big multi-platform, multi-year publishing idea and that he would like me to be a part of it. And I was like, oh, that'll be great. But then it kept being like, oh, well, someday. And then, suddenly around 2018, it began to firm up. 2019, it was like, oh, okay. And here the others are. And I didn't know any of them particularly well yet at that time. But it was funny because you had Kevin Scott, who was in the UK. You had Charles Soule, who's in New York City. You had Justina, who at the time was in Pennsylvania. And then you had Daniel Jose Older, who had just moved about a 5-minute drive from my house.
Oh.
Yeah. So the two of us went to a cafe and we're like, so what is this going to be? Yeah, we called New Orleans Lucasfilm South, but we could never get anybody else on board with that name. So too bad. Once we found that out, and then we got to go to Skywalker Ranch, which was awesome. I mean, it was really, really awesome. It's built to foster creativity. You have to walk between the different areas. And it is a working ranch. There are vineyards, horses, agricultural products, enormous wild turkeys that want to kill you. Which I didn't even have to add that. All wild turkeys want to kill you.
It's their revenge for Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Although I actually think Thanksgiving probably began as revenge on the first wild turkeys that tried to take somebody out. But when you're walking through these landscapes, you have to think things through. The library is this stunningly, stunningly beautiful area, just filled with books of mythology or zoology or, the clothing of the ancient Native Americans or the Far East or this or that. Just everything designed to spur the imagination and spark creativity. And you'd be looking through the books and this little piece of paper would fall out and you'd be like, oh, somebody looked at this for Attack of the Clones, this thing. So that was fabulous. The rooms are not especially grand, but they're very comfortable. The only thing you realize, because at first I was like, oh man, look at all these old reproduction movie posters. That's cool. And then I was like, dumbass, who do you think owns the originals of these? George Lucas, that's who owns them. So you'd have these gorgeous, huge mint condition posters for everything that were everywhere. But that was great. We got to watch Star Wars in the movie theater that George Lucas had set to his specifications for sound and projection. I mean, I was like, I can see the rivets on the sand crawler.
Oh, wow.
Just all these little things that I had never noticed before because it was so beautiful. We had a really great time there. The first time we went, we just batted around ideas, very vague ideas about what do we like in Star Wars. And then the second time, sort of the narrative with the nameless had come to, and we began breaking it out more and more in depth from there. And then we had a third story meeting, but we were not able to go. That was still just as lockdown was letting up.
All right.
And we were not yet able to go to Skywalker Ranch, so we had it at the convention center right next to Walt Disney World, which was fabulous, I have to say. In the morning, they have a little breakfast buffet, and all the waffles are shaped like Mickey. And all the pats of butter are shaped like Mickey, We're like, this is great, okay. But yeah, and So for years and years, we were doing weekly Zoom meetings before the whole world was doing the Zoom meetings and worked together. And honestly, the greatest part of the whole thing was getting to know the other writers and becoming friends with them and getting their insight and their perspective. And we all now very regularly talk to each other about things that don't have anything to do with the High Republic. You know, when I was working on my first graphic novels, which were for DC, you know, it was pretty amazing to be able to ask Kevin Scott and Charles Soule questions about that, you know, and like Charles came to me at one point and he was like, I don't know if the romantic part of this is working. Can you tell me kind of what's not clicking right there, you know, and different things we're able to share with each other, or, you know, George Mann told me this is a really great convention to come to, or
I hope he was right.
The person who's now my agent was actually suggested to me by Justina Ireland.
All right.
You know, and because writing can be pretty solitary, and it's great to have people that are in that industry that you can talk with that way. So I'm very, very thankful to the initiative for that above all, I think.
All right. And together with the others, but also by yourself, you introduced us to new characters like Reaths Silas or Affie Hollow or Geode, to name another favorite in Into the Dark. By the very nature of the whole thing, you had to pass on these characters to other authors.
Yes.
How did that feel for you? And also, how did the logistics of that work?
Honestly, it was mostly okay. Like, we knew that a lot of characters were going to wind up dying, but for the most part, you sort of like, okay, I know we're putting them into this harsh and difficult terrain, and this may happen. And also in our Slack channel, literally, there'd be things like, does anybody need so-and-so, or can they die? And sometimes it's like, no, I need them for this. And I'd be like,
Which
okay.
character are we talking about?
But then others, it was like, oh, they can go. Yeah. So, and then it was like, goodbye. You know, and a lot of times we would check with each other before doing something that would really drastically change the trajectory of a character that somebody else had established. It was sort of one of their main characters. You know, we all had characters like, you know, the crew of the vessel were very much ones that I was very connected to. You know, Cavan had Lorna D very much, and Daniel's little crew. Justina had Vernestra, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, if we had something really dramatic that was going to happen with them, we would sort of run it by somebody else, and you wanted to make sure. And I mean, the big thing wasn't the big things that happened to characters, because we sort of knew to bring that up. But sometimes you'd be like, oh, well, I will just casually mention that they have, you know, 3 brothers over here. And the other person is writing something like, I'll just casually mention that they're an orphan. And you don't even think to run that by each other, because it's just a little bit of background detail. And then that's where you run into trouble. But given how many moving parts there were in that, I think we held together pretty well.
Absolutely. No complaints there.
Yeah. So at one point when you were writing The Fallen Star, you must have asked, does anybody still need Stellans Schicksal?
Honestly, true story. I don't even know if I'm supposed to say this.
Spoilers.
But he survived the first draft.
Yeah.
You know,
I think that's been said.
Yeah. I never know, or never remember. I know in my heart it's true, but it wasn't. The impact wasn't coming across, and I was already playing up the other aspects. And at a certain point, it just becomes, you know, bathos. I was like, something else significant has to happen. And it wasn't that we didn't have other ideas for Stellan, but it was in a Zoom meeting. I was like, if you want this to land harder, I need to kill Stellan. And people were very surprised, but I mean, within like 2 minutes, everybody was like, you're right, that actually is what has to happen. It was as much a surprise to us as it was to you, is what I'm saying. But it had to be somebody who was that significant, that important, and kind of that beloved. You know, if something like that didn't happen, with the fall of Starlight Beacon, it wasn't going to hit the way we needed it to hit. So I'm very, very sorry, Stellan.
You know, these characters all had a purpose to serve in the end, right? And obviously you taking Stellan off the board meant things had to shift, right? So we were wondering if Stellan was originally meant to be the one to face off against Mark Rowe in Trials of the Jedi. Like, what was his original trajectory, if you still remember that?
I don't really, and I don't even know that it was that solidly defined yet. Really, even like at that point, the final fates of Avar and Elzar were only just taking shape.
Okay.
It was more an idea of sort of general beats and only a few very specific things that existed at that time. So it wasn't that there was a specific, like, Stellan must do this, except, no, he won't be there. Just, we had a lot of different ideas for Stellan, and he was very central and very important. And certainly he would have wound up with a great deal, but then it was like, this is what has to happen.
So in the the actual characters for the Luminous Nine were not defined at the beginning of the project.
No.
Okay, that's interesting to know, because I would have thought that would be something that
idea took shape very early, and there were people who definitely were considered to be part of it, but some of it firmed up as you went, because you can plan these things out in advance. And we tried, but when you get in and you start working with something, and when readers begin connecting, some things hit and some things don't, and some characters, we certainly didn't expect, like, that Lorna D was going to become as big a character.
Yeah, I think Cavaniss talked a lot about that.
As she became. And there were a few others like that we just didn't foresee, like, oh, okay, there's a whole lot more room to play with this. And you have to let it evolve some. If you try too hard to just put everything in this thing, you basically get phase 5 of the MCU, which is like, they're like, we're going to ignore all the characters and sequences you loved in favor of this thing we decided in a meeting 8 years ago that you don't actually have any interest in seeing whatsoever.
Sometimes you need to follow the characters. Yeah, it makes sense. So then who was your favorite character to write in the High Republic, if you can choose?
I mean, probably was Geode.
I thought so, yeah.
I enjoyed that whole crew, which really surprised me, because I love the Jedi. I love the mysticism. I thought that would be the thing that I would dive into with the High Republic. And then it kind of wound up not being. It almost felt like everybody else really had that covered, and I liked writing about these people who were just trying to make their way.
Yeah, and what's it like living in that golden age of the Jedi as a non-Jedi? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
So now the High Republic has ended.
Yes.
If Lucasfilm Publishing ever came up to you and asked you to write for another such huge project, would you be up to it?
In all honesty, I don't know. As wonderful as an experience as this was, it was extraordinarily time-consuming. Yeah. You were having to not only keep up with your own books, and of course, I don't only write Star Wars books, I write other books as well, which is true for all of us. But you had to keep up with everybody else's drafts.
Yeah.
And it was extremely, extremely time-consuming. If it hadn't been for lockdown, I don't actually know how we would have done it. We were captive, so that helped. But it would be difficult, honestly. I have a mystery series going now. I have another fantasy series that I'm starting next year. I have other series that I want to pitch. I don't know that I could invest that much time again. Now that said, maybe there could be some specifics to one thing that would make me change my mind, or, maybe those series die on the vine, and then I'm like, oh, I'm bored now, and
Please
I need
take
to
me back. No.
Yes. I mean, I certainly see myself writing more things in Star Wars. I will also say, like, as much of an honor as this was, and it was great to be working on the High Republic, and I enjoyed doing it, by the end, I'd gotten to miss the other parts of the galaxy. I miss the other time periods. You know, I was like, but I want to go back and write Leia. I want to look around at the sequel trilogy. You know, I've begged them to let me write books set in Knights of the Old Republic with like Mission in Zalbar and things like that.
Oh, that
and
would
if that
be
ever does
amazing.
happen, I've already explained, like, I have the backstory of Mission in Zalbar. It is no one's book but mine.
Okay, we'll talk after the interview.
Yeah. You know, I missed that. And so being really tied to just one area for, how long was that? Was it like 5 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a long time.
At least
kind
on
of.
our end, it was 5 years, and I don't know how long
It was
it's been.
probably more like 6
You
then
said
for us,
2018,
something like that.
7 years probably.
Yeah.
at this point.
Well, yeah. So it's a long time to only be in one little corner of a galaxy that I like playing across the whole field for.
That makes sense. So then in Into the Light, right, you got to conclude the young adult cycle
Yes.
of High Republic books. So like, what were your goals with this book? Like, what did you want to hit with it?
It's interesting because a few things changed
Right.
during the process. Something that originally was going to be a big part of that story, basically first story group was like, well, do a little less of that. Do a little less.
Okay.
Do a little less. Well, you can't actually have that at all, you know. And then it was sort of like, well, they're like, well, just edit around it. And I'd already written the book at this point, and I was like, guys, we have had a plot-ectomy. I was like, I have to go back and redo it.
Okay.
And I did.
Completely.
Not completely, but much more than you would want to be at that close to publishing time.
All right.
But in a lot of ways, it wound up being better for that because, you know, it had just been done by little, so you didn't really notice. And then we got to it, and I was like, there's no there anymore.
All right.
You know,
It needs focus then. Right?
yeah,
Okay.
it needs a different kind of focus now. And happily, they did let me go in that direction with it and support it, even though, you know, it called on all of us to do a lot at the last minute, but they very happily did that. But I wanted, you know, some meaningful endings for people, and also so much, especially of Phase 3 of the High Republic, you know, things got kind of dark. Things got sad. You know, a lot of people had died, and it's not that Into the Light doesn't have danger and peril and all of these things, but I wanted something that was, you know, more of an upbeat and sort of a hint.
Give them a win. Yeah.
Yeah, like they don't beat the Nile in that, but to have this moment where it was like, you know, I think one of the last things is like, for the first time in a long time, Marky and Rowe had a really bad day. You know,
And he
it was
would
like
have more of those
it's sort of
later.
that first kind of crack in the thing.
crack
So
in
that
his
made me
mask.
happy, and then it was really great to get Reath to that place in his journey, because he begins as sort of this, you know, bookish kind of Hermione Granger of the Jedi Temple.
We can relate to him.
Yes. I mean, I too am like, adventures are great for reading in the library. Or I think he's like, I like bugs. They're part of the Force, but I don't want them in my socks.
Yeah, I'd
you
rather
know?
read about the nameless than face them. Like,
Yeah. And have him be somebody. But it was also important to me not to have it be like, oh, he's outgrown that. It's like, no, that's still him. That's still a part of him. It's just not all that he is.
Right.
And of course, there's a big beat in Into the Light where they know what to do because it's something he was digging into the archives as a nerdy kid.
all my reading paid off.
Yeah, literally, he's just like, there is nothing better than research, and this is why we know it. And it was important for me to be able to vindicate that side of him and make clear, like, he is still that guy. He just hasn't pigeonholed himself into this very, very narrow frame where that's the only thing he can be. He has, you know, a much broader sense of his capabilities, and he still loves the archives most.
That was the starting point of the character, but not the end.
Yes.
So then how did it feel to say goodbye to those characters?
Oh, man. I mean, a little sad, but at the same time, it's very difficult to feel like that they're all gone. It feels like at any time you could wind up like doing a comic or doing a short story. These days may come. So, you know, I feel like they're all out there, and yeah, I don't feel like saying goodbye. It feels like they're there. I'm not working with them anymore, but they're still there.
They're in our hearts too.
Yes.
Absolutely, and I think they will stay there as well. Even the dead ones.
Aw.
So you already mentioned that there's still some projects you would like to do within the Star Wars universe. Anything else? Any other ideas you're playing around with?
Oh gosh, I mean, I'd love to write anything about Mon Mothma, who I'm wearing a Mon Mothma t-shirt as we speak.
I think we'll publish a few pictures alongside the interview.
Yeah, I mean,
people can see it.
Yeah, I always liked this character. I mean, again, she's the other female person in Star Wars, the original trilogy.
Sad.
So, but just to see her get more and more dimension, and then in Andor to become this incredible multi-dimensional character was so rewarding. And it's very, Chandrillan culture and the traditions that she's tied to. And when you watch Andor about 30 times, as I have done, you get to noticing things like how often she's framed, especially in the first season, within like a framework or a doorway or something that is enclosing her over and over again. What is the plant life that you see around? Bonsai trees. These things that ought to be tall and proud and majestic that have been trimmed down to stay small and fit in a little pot. My
so
God,
cool.
that show is incredible.
We should do an Andor podcast with you as our special guest at some point.
And now the Andor podcast begins. But
Another time, maybe.
there's so much there. I would love to write about her at pretty much any point. I would love to write more about Leia. I particularly pitched an idea. I've done this at several cons. I was like, I want to go back to, maybe 6 months or a year after Princess of Alderaan have young Leia and young Haldo basically getting badass lessons from Emphas Nest. Just
that would be something,
angry teenage girls kicking ass. I feel like that would be incredible and people would love it. And, I'd love to work with Rey someday. I think that would be awesome. Honestly, if I could get anything that branched off Andor in any way, I don't even know who is the most minor character you could have,
There were so many named characters in the... Yeah.
Hirt. Supervisor Hirt. Who dies like a punk.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Hirt, a Star Wars story coming
Yeah, he
soon.
died as a human shield for something that wasn't even human.
Spoilers for Andor.
Yeah. Big spoilers for Andor. Sorry, too bad.
Well, no,
but also, why are you leading half a life? Go watch Andor right now.
Signed by all of us, I think.
Yes.
So then, to conclude this, are there any upcoming projects also outside of Star Wars or current or upcoming projects that you want to plug? Anything that you've got going on?
Sure. I write the Mr. Darcy and Miss Tilney Mysteries, which is, I call it my Jane Austen, Agatha Christie mashup series. They are murder mysteries that take place involving Jane Austen characters set after her original novels. And I like to say that Jane Austen and Agatha Christie are the two great novelists for trapping a bunch of emotionally repressed English people in a big house and seeing what happens. And I was like, I'm going to do this thing where all the Austen things happen and all the Christie things happen. The 5th book in that series, The Fatal Unpleasantness at Netherfield, will be released, I think, next May.
Oh, wow.
Next May or maybe early June. I'm not sure of the exact date yet, but that time of year. Also in the Jane Austen area, when she passed away, rather young, she left behind a few fragments of books that were never completed. And one of them was something called The Watsons. And I have written a completion of The Watsons that is coming out, I believe, the end of next November. So almost exactly this time next year.
In a year then.
And that was a real challenge because that was trying to finish the book the way I thought she might have tried to finish it. So no ships, no ghosts, no anything. It was like, no. It's all just human drama now. I got to do that. And I am going to be working on, we've already sold the series, but I've only written about half of the first book. It's called Exalted, and essentially it is a Roman Empire fantasy novel that is set in ancient Rome, but taking their ideas about the gods and magic and curses and fortune-telling and treating them as real. And you get to revisit certain windows of Roman history, but It's not exactly the same characters. You'll recognize certain things, but you should not assume that everything's going to come out the same way. I'm so looking forward to doing that. I can't even tell you.
I have a very specific American friend that I'm going to recommend this to.
Oh, fantastic,
He thinks about the
fantastic.
Roman Empire a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that's not even going to come out until we have 3 books, and the first one won't even be out until 2027. But
All right.
they are coming, and and then hopefully there will be other things as well.
All right, then thank you for your time and, for allowing us to do this interview. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a pleasure and very insightful. Thank you,
Thank you,
Claudia
guys.
Gray.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And this has been a special episode of Jedi Cast. Go subscribe, and we'll hear you in the next one.
Hi, this is Claudia Gray. You're listening to Jedi Cast. I have friends everywhere.